The King Who Died Twice, The Terrifying End of Alexander the Great. Part 1. The Scene in Babylon. So let's talk about one of the most terrifying what-if scenarios in human history. Imagine you've conquered the known world. You're 32 years old. You've never lost a battle. You have redefined the borders of empires. You've been declared a pharaoh in Egypt and a god in Greece. You are, for all intents and purposes, the most powerful human being to ever walk the earth. And then, one night, after a long party in Babylon, you feel a bit of a chill. 10 days later, you're dead. But here's the kicker, and the reason we're talking about this today. What if you weren't actually dead? What if you were lying there, unable to move a muscle, unable to blink, unable to breathe on your own, while your generals started fighting over your empire and the embalmers started preparing your body for the coffin? This isn't just a horror movie plot. This is a very real scientific theory about Alexander the Great. Scientists today believe that Alexander didn't die of poison or malaria, but that he was a victim of a rare neurological disorder called Guillain-Barré syndrome. And the implication of that is haunting. Alexander the Great might have been buried alive. Let's set the stage. It's June, 323 BCE. Babylon is sweltering. Alexander is at the height of his power, planning an invasion of Arabia. He's drinking heavily, which was pretty standard for him, and he's attending a series of banquets. After one particularly long night of drinking, he starts complaining of a fever. He mentions a sharp, stabbing pain in his back, like he's been struck by a spear. At first, nobody thinks much of it. Alexander is a tough guy. He's survived arrow wounds, sword gashes, and lung punctures. But this is different. Over the next few days, the fever gets worse. He tries to bathe to cool down. He tries to offer sacrifices to the gods, but the strength is literally draining out of his limbs. By day 7, he can't speak. By day 10, the greatest conqueror in history is pronounced dead. But this is where the story gets weird, really weird. In the ancient world, when a king died in the middle of a summer heat wave in Iraq, the body was supposed to start decomposing almost immediately. We're talking hours. But the ancient chroniclers, the people who were actually there, recorded something that they called a divine miracle. They wrote that even though Alexander's body sat in the heat for 6 days while his generals argued over who would take charge, his body didn't decay. It stayed fresh. It didn't change color. It didn't smell. To the Macedonians, this was proof. Alexander wasn't just a man, he was a god. The gods were preserving his body because he was one of them. But modern science has a much chilling explanation. He wasn't being preserved by the gods, he was simply still alive. The silent prisoner. Now, to understand how this happened, we have to look at what was going on inside Alexander's body. For centuries, historians argued over what killed him. Was it poison? Was it West Nile virus? Was it typhoid? But in 2018, a senior lecturer at the Dunedin School of Medicine, Dr. Catherine Hell, proposed a theory that changed everything. She suggested Alexander suffered from Guillain-Barré syndrome, or GBS. If you've never heard of GBS, count yourself lucky. It's an autoimmune disorder where your body's immune system gets confused and starts attacking your own peripheral nervous system. Specifically, it attacks the coating of your nerves. Imagine a house where the insulation on the electrical wiring starts to melt away. The signals can't get through. Your brain is sending the command to move your arm, but the wire is frayed. The message never reaches the muscle. It usually starts in the feet and hands and moves upward. It's called ascending paralysis, and this matches the historical record of Alexander's final days perfectly. He started with a fever and pain, then he lost the ability to walk, then he lost the ability to move his arms, and finally, he lost the ability to speak. But here's the terrifying part about GBS. It affects the muscles, but it usually doesn't affect the brain. While Alexander was lying on that bed in Babylon, he wasn't in a coma. He wasn't out of it. His mind was likely perfectly clear. He could hear his generals arguing at the foot of his bed. He could hear his wife, Roxane, weeping. He could feel the heat of the Babylonian sun, but he couldn't move a finger. He couldn't even blink to tell them he was still there. In the 4th century BCE, doctors didn't check for a pulse the way we do now. They didn't have stethoscopes. They checked for breath. They would hold a feather to someone's nose or look for the rise and fall of the chest. Now, think about this. If Alexander had GBS, his breathing would have become incredibly shallow. Because the paralysis eventually hits the diaphragm, the muscle that helps you breathe, he would have needed very little oxygen because he wasn't moving. His body would have entered a sort of low power mode. To an ancient doctor, he looked like a corpse. His skin was cold, his breath was invisible, and his body was totally still. But inside that corpse, Alexander was still there. 6 days of limbo. Can you imagine those 6 days? The history books tell us that after he was pronounced dead, there was total chaos. His generals, the Daiochi, didn't immediately start the funeral. They started fighting over the crown. They were literally arguing over his dead body. And Alexander is just there. He's listening to his empire being torn apart. He's listening to the people he trusted most begin to betray his legacy. And he's waiting. Maybe he's waiting for the paralysis to break. Maybe he's trying with every ounce of his legendary will to just twitch a toe, to make a sound, to do anything to show them he's still there. But the miracle of his non-decaying body was actually his death sentence. Because his body wasn't rotting, the embalmers eventually decided it was time to start their work. In ancient times, embalming wasn't a gentle process. They would have been preparing to wash the body, to apply resins, and eventually to place him in a gold sarcophagus. Scientists believe that for those 6 days, Alexander was in a state of pseudo-coma. He was technically alive, but he was a prisoner in a suit of flesh. When the chroniclers wrote that he remained fresh for 6 days, they were accidentally recording the most prolonged, high-stakes medical error in history. He didn't die in his bed on June 10th. He likely died days later, either from the eventual failure of his lungs or, more horrifyingly, during the process of being prepared for burial. The historical impact. In the next section, we're going to dive into why this theory makes so much sense from a historical perspective. We'll look at his symptoms, the stabbing back pain, and why that's a classic sign of GBS. We'll also talk about the wine. Everyone blames the wine, but the wine might have been the trigger for the disease.